Hey everybody, welcome to ThaxCast. As always, my name's Terrell. With me today I have my brother James. He doesn't live near me, so that's why we're having to do a Skype call. And this is the first time I've done something like this for the channel, so hopefully it works well, and I would love your feedback on what you think of it and how it goes, and just anything you have to say about it. I appreciate it. James, tell the people that don't know you a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, I'm living down in Houston now. I work for Lockheed Martin, NASA contract, the Orion vehicle. Do human factors engineering, which is basically just kind of making sure that the vehicle design takes the humans into account. Everybody's a little different. People have different sizes, needs, capabilities, whatnot. So design engineers don't always take all that into account. So a big part of my job is to make sure that we actually do that and that people can safely and effectively fly these things.
So it's like a mixture of efficiency and comfort and functionality.
A little bit, yeah. Really, what we're trying to do is make sure that the design fits the human already, and that a lot of times in the past you kind of do operational workarounds, make sure things you make things work later by doing fixes or kludges or whatever. And here we're just trying to actually make sure going out the gate that everything really does what it should with the person, and the system responds the way you'd expect and things like that.
Okay. And James is a lifelong nerd. So what kind of stuff are you into as far as kind of the nerd geek culture goes?
I'm a little bit of most everything. Things wax and wane my interests. And Star Wars is probably a big one. Recently joined the 501st Legion, which is basically a costuming group that does charity work. They do a lot of things with Make-A-Wish, making appearances for kids at children's hospitals, and then also doing work at conventions and raising money to then turn back over to Make-A-Wish. So I've only done that recently, within the last, month and a half.
Okay, so it's real recent for you.
Yeah, it's real recent for me. Now, my wife has done it for about a year. She's also done the Rebel Legion, which is basically the rebel side of things. 501st is purely, Vader's Fist. It's all Imperial type stuff. So actually what I've got right now is a TIE Reserve pilot, which I think you only see in background of Return of the Jedi. That's basically a pilot, except instead of wearing the helmet in the box, they're just wearing like an officer's cap. It's a relatively easy entry level thing, but I do have the armor coming in to do the rest later. So
like the full TIE pilot like helmet and everything?
Yeah, like the helmet and the hoses and the chest box and everything. It's going to require a lot of assembly. I think that's supposed to be coming here the next week or so, though.
Cool.
So that's kind of the big current one. Kind of into some fantasy type stuff too. So Song of Ice and Fire, Wheel of Time. There's a lot of things on my to-read list that I haven't. My wife gives me a lot of flack for it because I suggested series to her, and I haven't read them, and she has read them all. Now, she reads a lot more than I do. Back in back in high school, I had a friend of mine tell me, to read Robin Hobb and Assassin's Apprentice and stuff like that, and I still today have never gotten around to it, but I suggested to Sherry, and she's read every book Robin Hobb's written now. But I enjoy that kind of thing. I just haven't. I don't read as much as I should.
Okay.
But yeah, I read through all those, and then of course Game of Thrones TV adaptation, and watch that as well. Probably see the junk in the background. I've got stacks of comics around. I buy comics on and off, have since I was
little.
Preteen, I guess. Well, how about those Transformers comics when I was little? I guess Death of Superman started me buying the rest of the stuff, and
I actually remember you getting the Death of Superman.
Yeah, actually, the Return Adventures 500, I think, was the first Superman comic I bought, and that started everything. And I got the Death of Superman trade at some flea market thing we went to, and I've got now thousands of comics boxed up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I never really got big on the comic book part, so I don't know, like say the Marvel and DC universes as well as I could. I know a lot of the cinematic stuff, but I don't know the deep cuts and things like that. So when I see things like the Green Lantern movie, I mean, I thought it was a good movie. I didn't think it was a great movie, but not knowing the full background and the storylines and stuff like that, I thought it was just fine, as a standalone movie instead of being part of one of the big cinematic universes.
Yeah, and that one I didn't think it was as bad as a lot of people, but I did see a lot of problems with it. They tried to bring in a lot of stuff from more recent comics that I think just didn't go well.
Like blending too many eras of the comic kind of thing.
Well, like some of the parallax stuff was just not. I don't know. I never really bought into it to begin with, and then having him be basically a cloud that I can't even remember as long as I saw the movie, but a lot of that was not very good.
Because didn't Parallax come from Green Lantern somehow?
Yeah, so
Like
originally
that?
Parallax. So this was right around the death of Superman. It was part of the death of Superman story, which is what also got me further into Green Lantern and started buying Green Lantern comics. Uh, so Coast City, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan's home city, was destroyed by Mongol, and I guess this was during the Return of Superman arc. But so he basically just goes off the deep end, right? He goes crazy. He's lost everything he's ever cared about and loved, and he just goes nuts and starts taking out all the other Green Lanterns, trying to increase his power. And he thinks that if he gets enough power, he can bring back the city and everybody loves and all that. And basically just goes nuts. And he kind of gets an alternate looking costume. He blows up the central power battery. There had been thousands of Green Lanterns. Now there's only one ring and one Guardian left.
So it sort of sounds very similar to the Star Wars line of Anakin.
A little bit.
Where he's overcome with grief and he thinks if he gets powerful enough, he can fix it.
Yeah, well, it's a very human thing to do. I'm hurt. I want to make things better. So that's kind of what it was in the comics for a long time. And then he kind of came back a couple times as sort of a villain who was always wanting to remake the world and make things better, but everybody fights that. And ultimately, he kind of dies a hero redeeming himself in this Final Night story several years later. That kicked off another weirdness of Superman, which I don't want to go down too many rabbit trails. But basically kind of restored the sun sort of thing. And then after that, Jeff Johns came on board, who's kind of a big creative guy at DC now and had a lot to do with that Green Lantern movie. He wrote a lot of Green Lantern comics. And he decided that Parallax was not just an alter ego that Hal Jordan became after being Green Lantern. He decided that, oh no, because he and Dan DiDio, who was the editor-in-chief, or I don't know, some bigwig at DC, Dan really liked a lot of the Silver Age characters. He loved Hal Jordan. I did too. I'm not going to fault him for that. He loved Barry Allen. He wanted to bring all these guys back, and he didn't like how Hal had kind of been made into a villain. So Jeff Johns kind of added this aspect of saying, well, Hal didn't actually go crazy. There was, the Green Lantern rings have this yellow impurity. The rings couldn't affect anything yellow. That's the way it had been for decades. And they decided that, well, that yellow impurity came from this entity of fear, which is, anti, Green Lanterns are no fear.
Right.
So this fear entity had been trapped within the battery by the Guardians, and that was the yellow impurity. And when he blew up the battery, he took on that impurity, and then that made him do all these other terrible things.
So, like in a sense, it wasn't actually him doing it; it was him.
It was this parallax entity.
Yeah, being possessed by it, I guess, essentially.
Yeah, and I really didn't like that because I hated that Hal went nuts and kind of went off the deep end. But at the same time, like I said, it's a very human response, right? Your heroes can be human; they can have their faults. One big Batman thing in the Joker, one bad day, right? One bad day can make anybody crazy, was kind of Joker's thing. And this kind of supported that, right? He had the worst day. He lost everybody. All of his friends and family and his whole city. I mean, I felt like it was a very human response. And then for them to come back later and say, "Oh no, it's this entity, this
Okay.
you know,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like by retconning it, they take some of the raw human parts of it and soften it in the because heaven forbid we have a dark side to the heroes kind of thing.
right,
Okay.
right." And a lot of that, like I said, this was DC editorial at the time. The guys in charge loved their Silver Age heroes, and like I said, I love Hal. I always have. And I was glad to see him come back as Green Lantern when he did. I just didn't like the way they did it with this yellow fear entity, which then also led to these whole rainbow lanterns. There's 7 different colors now, I think, in the spectrum they use. And now it's led to some good stories, but it kind of went off the deep end for a little bit in terms of story for a while. But yeah, it just really kind of cheapened it. And then I will go on a rabbit trail here. Another thing that's Dan DiDio, this editorial team did, was I mentioned they like the Silver Age guys, so like Barry Allen. You know, a lot of us that read the comics, and if you had read the comics but you didn't, but if you watch it just before you started at all, the Flash,
Not really.
and they didn't emphasize it in the show, but the Flash was Wally West, and Wally West had been the Flash since 1986. Whenever they blew up the old worlds and the Crisis on Infinite Earths, consolidated all their stories and histories and updated everything. And one of the biggest things there is that Barry Allen the Flash sacrificed his life to save everything. And they always talk about comic book deaths not sticking. This one stuck. This one stuck for 20 something years.
Oh wow. That's big in the comic book world because nobody big dies. They come back or they didn't really die or
Yeah, this is one of the few ones that stuck. Now, there's a couple of time travel shenanigans where he made little appearances, but in the end, you know, he actually died, and it was a huge deal, and it always was a driving force for Wally. Wally being Kid Flash, and you know, so trying to live up to the legacy and all that. And then at one point, they just decided, nah, we're going to bring Barry back. So they kicked Wally to the curb and all the stories that they were about to do with him, because at this point, at the time they kind of got rid of Wally, Wally had a couple of kids that had variations of his powers, and then they did this big event where Barry came back, and the kids' powers got kind of tweaked. Well, one of them got depowered, the other one basically just became another Kid Flash, and then all that just went away whenever they decided to do this Flashpoint story, which then kicked off the New 52 in whatever year it was, 2001? No, it was later than that. 2011. 2011 they did this story. That completely changed all the histories and stuff again, and it was wildly unpopular for most of the characters. They cut years out, made all the heroes younger. Wally West was written out of history, never existed. Barry Allen had always been the Flash, never had a sidekick. There were a lot of other side characters. The biggest ones that suffered were the sidekicks, because a lot of the sidekicks wouldn't have had the opportunity to be a sidekick and grow up when they went and shrunk everybody's history down to about 5 years.
Yeah, I can see that.
And some of the books that have been doing fairly well got to keep a lot of their history, or at least try to. So Green Lantern, for example, have been doing really well. And most of Green Lantern just pretended like nothing changed. And you would occasionally, they would reintroduce a character that you didn't even know needed to be reintroduced and give them a slightly different story. But for the most part, they pretended like nothing happened in Green Lantern. Batman, there was quite a bit of that. But the problem with Batman got problematic because there's so many Robins.
Yeah.
There's so many Robins over the years.
Yeah, I've lost track of those ones.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, he's only been Batman for 5 years. Oh, but all these guys were still Robin. They even kind of messed that up. So, for those that don't follow at all, yeah, a lot of people know there's more than one Robin. But I think a lot of people think maybe there's just two. Because some people who actually kind of, maybe watch cartoons and stuff know There's a Nightwing, and sometimes when there's Nightwing, there's also a Robin, so that means there's two of them, right?
Right.
So you got Dick Grayson, the original Robin, then Jason Todd, the one who got killed off in a 1-900 contest, 900 call contest. Then you got Tim Drake, who's the Robin that I grew up with, who was for a long time one of my favorite characters. He was, when I started buying comics, was shortly after he became Robin, and he eventually got his own solo series. And we were about the same age at that time. So it was there were a lot of relatable stories in the solo series in terms of growing up and going to school and dealing with the world and all that. And he was kind of my Robin, right? And then there was a brief kind of gimmicky thing where a superhero named Spoiler was Robin for about 6 months. This blonde girl who had kind of been sometimes partnered with Tim Drake in the Robin books. So she was the fourth Robin, which I think maybe now it's canon she was never Robin. But Tim... So Tim now, what they say... I guess to finish the lineage of the Robins. So eventually Tim decides to go on his own and kind of be Red Robin, because the writers introduced Batman having a son, Damian Wayne, who he then took on as Robin. So Damian becomes Robin. Tim Drake becomes Red Robin. And now what the official story is, I say now, I'm behind on my reading right now. They may have changed this with the Rebirth stuff. Dick was Robin for just a little bit. Jason was Robin for just a little bit. Still died. Still was killed by the Joker. Tim was never actually Robin. He was only ever Red Robin. And then Damian was Robin, I guess, concurrent with Tim being Red Robin. And
so now this has been compressed into a much smaller time frame?
Yeah, but now, so I'm behind on my reading for the last year or so. So New 52 went on for 5 years or so. Then they did this Rebirth initiative that was not a reboot, but it kind of was a soft reboot, where they brought back a lot of the classic stuff that people loved about what had been thrown in the trash. And one of the big changes was Superman. Superman changed more than a lot of them. He was made a lot younger. His personality was made different. He was never in a relationship with Lois Lane. There's just a lot of stuff different there. And they essentially brought back the classic Superman as a part of Rebirth. And they also brought back Wally West as a part of Rebirth. And it's like, oh, he's been lost in time and everybody forgot him and blah, blah, blah. But they started trying to kind of fix a lot of the things that people hated about the New 52 change.
So where the comic books are concerned, how much of the canon spills over into what they're now making the DC, I guess you can call it cinematic universe, whatever, expanded universe is what they call it.
Expanded universe is what they call it. But of course, now who knows if they're going to keep going with it.
Because honestly, like I said, I'm not well versed on the comics at all, but it really feels like they were like, oh man, look at all the stuff that Marvel's doing and people love it. Let's try to cram that into a few different things to do the same thing. And it just feels very rushed and to a certain extent poorly thought out.
That's absolutely what they're doing. Zack Snyder, I know a lot of people love Zack Snyder, and I liked him before he took over the DC stuff.
I liked him on the Batman, or not, no, it's not the Batman.
He did Watchmen and he did 300.
300, there you go.
So he had done some. Those were both comic book movies, right? They're not superhero movie. Well, I mean, Watchmen's a superhero movie, I guess, but not mainline DC.
Right.
So he had done these things and done well. So I mean, I know Watchmen gets mixed reviews, but a lot of what people didn't like about it is that it was a little too true to the comics. But yeah, he did pretty well with a lot of that. But then, I mean, you're right. A lot of it was they saw Marvel cashing in. And DC's got this huge stable of superheroes. Some of them are wildly popular. They've been around longer than any of Marvel's.
Yeah.
So they try and go make something of it, and it just wasn't that great. I mean, there's varying problems, and not all the movies are completely terrible. But
no, I thought Wonder Woman was fantastic.
It was, and that was not a Snyder movie.
True. And honestly, as far as DC movies go, I really liked the Dark Knight trilogy, but that's not part of the current
No, yeah, that was before
expanded
all this
universe.
stuff.
So,
Yeah,
and
and
honestly, I like the
before-
idea. I like the idea of Ben Affleck as Batman, and I thought
I was surprised by how much I liked that. I
yeah,
was upset when I found out about the casting. I felt like he did a really good job. I actually really liked him as an older Batman.
yes, I thought it was great. I thought it was a good character for him. I thought he did well with it. Unfortunately, the supporting story around it was kind of a letdown, and I don't know, just
Yeah, well, and Wonder Woman also. I was not sold on her casting when she was cast. She did great.
yeah, she was
I love her.
phenomenal.
Yeah, she was a big highlight of Batman versus Superman.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that they really missed a few key things. And well, I guess let me first address the first thing you asked, which was how much of the recent comics, kind of goes into movie canon. They've pulled a good amount of, they kind of tried to pull a good amount of some of the New 52 type stuff into the movies. So Justice League was a lot like some of the New 52 Justice League comics, except that instead of Darkseid, you had Steppenwolf, and a lot of people thought we were going to get Darkseid.
I mean, that was the big assumption, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and then I think what they decided was, oh, no, we'll save Darkseid for the sequel that may now never happen because the movie didn't do near as well as they expected it to. But, yeah, there's some stuff that carries over with the problems. So you got Man of Steel. The casting's not bad. You got Henry Cavill. He
was fine.
pretty decent. He looked the part. He did well. But Man of Steel had a lot of things that just didn't sit well with people. So whether you're a fan of the comics or not, number one of Superman's number one things is you don't kill, you value human life.
Well, now there have been some times in the old comic books where he killed people. I do know that much. And to be fair, it's not like he was like ruthlessly doing it. It was like this has to be done kind of thing.
Well, so he made that call with Zod. At the same time, as they're completely trashing Metropolis, there's people everywhere.
Yeah, and that's something they
I
don't really
feel
address.
They overcorrected in Batman versus Superman for that because they got raked over the coals for that. That there's so many people had to have died in all this.
Oh yeah, hundreds.
So at the beginning, once Batman versus Superman started, they took every opportunity to say like, "Oh, this area is abandoned," or "Oh, we evacuated people from here." They were very heavy-handed with it.
Yeah, I'm sure those big office buildings were emptied out.
Yeah, but for Man of Steel, it was very much we're going to destroy everything, and maybe we just killed a few thousand people.
Right.
So there was that. There was also, I was always bothered by the way Jonathan Kent died in that movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was
like, I have to go save the dog. Oops, I got my foot stuck. You know what? Stay there, man. I'm just going to stand here, and I just sacrifice my life to get the dog out of the car. No.
Yeah, that was pretty.
The drive behind his powers, yes, I get that. Yes, that's consistent with pretty much every iteration of Jonathan Kent that's ever been in film, comics, whatever. But I'm going to go risk my life for the dog, and oops, don't even try to do anything.
That's what bugged me the most. It's just like the observation of it, and oh, there he goes.
Yeah, well, and then also from just a style standpoint, this very Zack Snyder thing. There's not much in the way of color through the movie. Everything's blue and gray and black, dark. It's all muted blue tones, and it gets old. And Superman is kind of supposed to be about hope and light and
that's why traditionally he's always been very bright, blue and red and stuff.
And that's not really what you got here. I didn't mind some of the other stuff as far as Lois Lane immediately knows who he is. She's a smart girl. That's totally believable, and that's fine. No problems there. But just some of the basic character things seemed a little off. I still think it's a fine movie. There's just parts of it I didn't like.
I think Amy Adams' acting could have been a little bit better.
Yeah, but some of that's also director too. It's
Yeah,
hard to
no,
tell
yeah, totally.
directors. So to jump to Star Wars for a second, um, Natalie Portman in the first couple prequel movies, she's god awful.
Yeah, and she's a great actress.
And yeah, you can see
Yeah,
she's won awards in other movies.
yeah.
She's not a bad actress. She just had a really bad director and a decently bad scripted dialogue to deal with.
So looking back at it, going into Star Wars, I think George Lucas, he did great with the writing, and he did great with what he had at the time, like budget wise and time wise and stuff like that. But when you really look at it as a director, he's pretty bad. Uh, in the original Star Wars trilogy, it's not as noticeable because you have some people that have acting under their belts. There's not a lot of background characters and stuff.
Well, there's a lot of unknowns in the first movie, but the difference in the original trilogy is he only directed one movie. He directed all the prequels. He only directed one of the original trilogy.
Really? I thought he did two.
Irving Kershner did Empire Strikes Back, and oh crap, I should know this stuff, and I don't. He only directed one of the original trilogy, and he did the entire prequel trilogy.
Okay, but
and he clearly didn't know what to do with kids. So
yeah, like
Jake Lloyd,
the pod racing stuff, like that whole, like when they're fixing the pod racer and stuff like that, that is awful. And like, aside from what people generally gripe about with the prequels, here's what bugs me the most about the prequels. Watch it and watch like the extras and like the minor characters and stuff. They have no idea what they're doing. Their body language is like the most awkward stuff ever, where people are like, yeah. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, clearly he didn't know what he was doing with kids. Jake Lloyd, not a great actor to begin with, but
it's hard to tell. Again, Natalie Portman looked bad too. But
well, I mean, like,
seeing that she can be good. Jake Lloyd, we saw him in that, and he was bad there too. Would he have been that bad with a good director? I don't know. And then it carries over.
To be fair, the only one I've seen him in was what's it called? The Jingle All the Way, the Christmas movie.
I don't think I ever saw that.
And he was a little better in that, but not a lot.
But staying on the kid thing, so you get to episode 2, and Boba Fett is a kid there, right? Same director, George Lucas directing. And I just saw sometime in the last few months, I went on this random YouTube bouncing around of watching Graham Norton show clips. And there was an episode with Ewan McGregor on there, and he was talking about, he's telling a story about shooting episode 2, and he didn't drop any names, but if you've seen, you know, if you know everything about the movies. He's talking about a scene where Obi-Wan comes to Jango Fett's quarters, I guess, and they try and hide the suit and all that. And there's a point where Boba sees him and kind of gives him a disgusted look. And they said they kept trying to do that, kept trying to tell him to look whatever. And Lucas was, but all McGregor says is the director. The director wasn't really giving him a lot of help, and that they kept doing this take over and over and over and over again. And he was like, I wanted to help a kid out, so I took him to the side between takes, and I said, hey, I'm going to walk up to you, and I'm going to look at you, and I want you to look at me like I just farted. and they did that, and that's where he got the crinkly, disgusted look on his face, and they took that take. But that's, again, I don't think Lucas knew how to direct kids.
Well, I don't think he knew how to direct a lot of people.
Well, I mean, there's truth there too, but the kids are inexperienced enough that they can't overcome it.
That's the thing, especially later on with like Natalie Portman and them, is they've got the experience under their belt to like, okay, he's really wanting this, but I can go with that and make it a little bit better. But like the kids and a lot of the background people that don't have all that experience end up coming up as very awkward. But like I said, watch the prequel trilogy and watch the background people.
Specifically, the background stuff in the pod racing specifically is actually pretty bad.
Yeah,
in terms of what they're doing, how they're celebrating, how it is pretty awkward.
Painful.
I'll admit that. I mean, we could end up doing a whole huge long conversation about Star Wars in general. But yeah. So I mean, the director can make an immense difference in the movie, you know, and that's where, getting back to the comics thing, I think that was the bigger problem DC had early, was they gave the keys to everything to one director, and he didn't have a good feel for how things are supposed to go. You get to Batman versus Superman, and as we both said, I actually liked Ben Affleck as Batman.
Yeah.
But now also, you've got a Batman that's killing people indiscriminately. I mean, he's not just going around and shooting people necessarily, but actions he's taking are clearly leading to deaths.
Well, and related to that is Captain America. Like, he's messing some people up with that shield and some of those hits and stuff.
You know, I don't know if Captain America. I don't know if Captain America was ever really a no-kill kind of guy, and I don't remember, because I have not read as many Marvel comics as I've read DC. But you gotta remember, Captain America was a soldier.
True,
right?
But
so, yes, he's got the shield, but that doesn't mean that he's not gonna take somebody down if he needs to.
But look at the way he's portrayed in the movie as like this, like in the beginning of I think it's the first Avengers movie when he's like language, like he's supposed to be this like really wholesome, like all American dude, but just like messing people up, like, hey, here's this unbreakable shield to the face.
Well, again, he's still a soldier, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
That's his primary function, is to be a soldier. He can still be, you know, mom and apple pie, all American, good old boy, but he's a soldier.
I guess so.
I will say about inspiration there, though, in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I've not read a ton, not like I said, not as many Marvel comics as I've read DC, but a lot of the Marvel movies are based off what had been their Ultimate Universe line for a little bit. And I will recommend that you read the original trade of The Ultimates. There's been it was kind of the Ultimate Universe's Avengers team, and there's even like now they've merged everything, there's an Ultimates team, but the original Ultimates comic, it was like a 13-issue miniseries, I think. Maxi series, I don't know what you call 13 issues. But that was very good, and that's where a lot of the character inspiration and the costume inspiration comes for a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Captain America is very much modeled on that. Hawkeye is very modeled on that, down to his costume is basically out of the Ultimate Universe. Nick Fury, before Samuel L. Jackson was cast in the movies, Nick Fury in the Ultimate Comics was drawn to look like Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, really?
The original Marvel Comics, he's a David Hasselhoff-looking spy guy.
Yeah, I remember seeing those ones.
With white wingtips.
Yeah.
But Ultimate Universe, he's always looked like Samuel L. Jackson.
Okay.
So the Ultimate Universe had some pluses and minuses. Spider-Man was incredible. The entire run of Ultimate Spider-Man, I recommend reading. The Ultimates was very good. It had a lot of good things going for it. Now, I would separately argue that Fantastic Four was garbage and the X-Men were very good that they did in that. But I went through a phase where I'd run down to half-price books or whatever, and I'd buy these trades and try to read the whole line. And Spider-Man and the Ultimates were very good. Iron Man was not. It's a personal taste thing for me. Orson Scott Card wrote the original Ultimate Iron Man series. So you got a solid sci-fi writer. Seemed like it could be good. It was so weird it turned me off entirely.
I think a lot of the appeal of the current Iron Man is just Robert Downey Jr.
A lot of it is.
And the character, like the way that he plays that character. Because I think with the way that he is, you could throw almost any story at it, and like by the time he puts in his little personal characteristics into it, it makes for an entertaining movie. And that may not always translate into like a comic book.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe is a completely different thing if they don't cast Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He is Iron Man. He's what sold that movie. I mean,
it's what brought him to fame, really, or back to fame.
Movie.
Yeah,
his personality takes it. I mean, there were stretches in the comics. Again, I haven't read a ton of old Iron Man comics, but there's stretches of the comics where he's an angry, mean drunk. and that's not something that's going to appeal to people. And yes, there was the tiniest flash of that in Iron Man 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. But it's Robert Downey Jr. made that character and helped propel the franchise. I mean, I never I love Chris Evans as Captain America. I would have never imagined that after him playing Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four.
Honestly, I'd forgotten that he was Johnny Storm until like way later on, and I saw something for the Fantastic Four again, and I was like, oh man, I forgot he was in that.
He was a decent Johnny Storm.
Yeah, he had the right attitude and everything for it.
I feel like the casting of those movies was pretty good, honestly. It's just the writing, especially the second movie, was.
I never saw the second one.
It was not very good.
The first one was iffy enough that I was like, I didn't take my chance on the second one.
You know what? I like the first one fine because I felt like it was made as a family movie. And if you consider it as a family movie, something you take kids to and enjoy, the first one is not bad.
I mean, and I didn't think it was like bad. I didn't think it was terrible. It was okay.
Yeah, no, I thought it was pretty good. Again, especially considering it like a family movie. The second one was really not good, but the second one looks amazing compared to the reboot. I don't know if you saw the reboot.
No, I didn't see the reboot either.
It's awful. Now, it doesn't help that the guy they've got playing Reed Richards is kind of plays the asshole or villain or antagonist and some other things. I think he was, God, what was it? Maybe it was in the Hunger Games. I can't remember. He played the antagonist in one of these other ones too. I don't know if it was Hunger Games or Divergent. I don't know what it was, but he's just not a likable guy. And then the writing wasn't very good. It was just not. It was not a good movie. That was one of the few comic book movies that I saw when it was new, and kind of felt like I'd almost wasted my time.
Now, going back to Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, I also feel the same way about Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
Yeah, no, he is Deadpool, and he's the whole
because he really is.
Right. Now, I do have to ask you this. Did you watch Once Upon a Deadpool?
No, I saw the previews for it.
Okay, so it's coming out next week. It was like a 3-week turnaround for this thing to come out on Blu-ray and digital. So just somebody watching it for the first time, like a kid watching it for the first time, you won't enjoy it as much if you haven't seen the first movie because there's references and you're not as attached to Vanessa and things like that if you haven't watched the first movie. But the entire Princess Bride Fred Savage framing device is incredible. It makes the movie. I mean, there's some awkward cuts. There's lots of editing in terms of getting blood and gore out. There's some little scenes that are skipped. But everything they show with him and Fred Savage is gold. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a scene late that just, especially considering the mood in the theater, and Sherry was with me, it was perfect.
To make a small confession, I actually haven't seen Deadpool 2. It's been on my list.
What is wrong with you?
It's been on my list. I haven't really seen almost anything recently that I can really think of.
Take a night off from this stuff and watch Deadpool 2. And watch the original before you watch Once Upon a Deadpool. But also,
I have seen the original.
Deadpool.
I mean, I have seen the original. I loved it.
Yeah, so the second is good too. I think I like the first one a little better. The second one, it's just a different movie. It's a different tone, right? But there's a lot more Easter eggs you'll get as just like a casual X-Men fan, just from watching movies and stuff like that. It's just a fun movie, and the music is fun. There's lots of little hidden things. It's a lot of fun. And then, like I said, so we watched it again. Watched it in the theater. Then I bought the unrated extended version. So we watched that at home a week before we went and watched Once Upon a Deadpool, just kind of refresh, and then now we'll know what got skipped and whatever. And that's a lot of fun. And then the friends, I don't know who had, if it was Ryan Reynolds or somebody else, who had the idea for Princess Bride. It works wonderfully. And the whole set. Have you watched any of the the previews or the trailers or commercials they did for Once Upon a Deadpool?
Yeah, I saw. Well, really, I saw the Fred Savage stuff.
Okay, well, I mean, there was a lot of them. They released probably 4 or 5 of them.
I think I saw probably 2 or 3 of them.
But if you notice, so we recently let our kids watch Princess Bride for the first time, and they loved it. But we watched it partly because we want to let the kids watch it, but partly to prepare ourselves because we knew it was going to be Deadpool references.
Right.
And the bedroom is completely reconstructed down to the 1980s Cheetos bag.
See, I thought that it looked uncannily similar. Now I haven't seen the Princess Bride in a while, but when I saw that trailer, I was like, that looks like the actual room.
It's the same. I mean, like I said, like the freaking 1980s Cheetos bag. They have not had that style of Cheetos bag in decades. Like that level of detail. They had it all. It's incredible.